Good evening and welcome to LegalTech Live. I'm your host, Nick Rishwain, and I'm here with my guest tonight. First of all, a guest co-host who you'll probably recognize. That's Nicole Clark, CEO and founder of Trellis Legal Intelligence. And our guest tonight is Michael Rinehart, who is the CIO of Fox Rothschild. And this episode, naturally, has come from the audience wanting to get a better perspective on how law firms are purchasing technology, wanting that perspective from inside. And with that, I had reached out to a partner at Fox who's been a guest on our show, and he put me in touch with Michael. And Michael, Nicole, thank you both for being here tonight to chat and have a good Thursday evening chat on legal technology. Let me give you a little background. Michael, you're responsible for leadership and management of the firm's information services department, and you direct the development, implementation, support, and use of the firm's information and technology systems. And your bio also says that you continually assess the firm's technology needs to meet and exceed client needs and recommend practical, cost-effective solutions that offer improved service and functionality. Michael, how did you get in the role? Give us a little background on that. How did you come from? Did you come from a law background or a tech background? Give us a little bit of that first.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me. And so a little introduction and background. So Fox Rothschild is my first law firm. Okay. As much as I'm almost around 9 years in now, I just still feel a little bit like a newbie. There's a lot of people that have spent nice long careers here that seem to get into legal and stay in legal, which is nice. Prior to Fox Rothschild, I was in a life science distribution company in corporate America, and then I did IT consulting prior to that. And I just sort of, through my network and relationship, stumbled into Fox, where they were looking for a leadership change, and they were actually looking for someone outside of legal. I think they were a little torn, but they were enticed by the idea of someone coming in from outside of legal that might bring new ideas and thoughts into the law firm. And the gentleman running the firm, our managing partner at that time, and myself really hit it off in our interview process. And I really felt like it would be a good place to spend a long time and really hope to make a difference. And so 9 years later, I still feel like there's a lot to do. There's always a lot to do in the legal technology space, but we're still enjoying ourselves, and the firm's growing quite well over those 8 or 9 years.
That's fantastic. And I like that they wanted an outsider, because
I was just going to say that.
Did you
That's
agree
really
with that?
Interesting. Yeah.
That is an interesting, certainly we've seen a lot of articles more recently about law firm innovation and their hiring from outside to come in and be innovation managers and so forth. But that's interesting that 9 years ago, they were looking ahead, and that's fantastic.
When you first came in, did you notice sort of a difference between the software decision making and all that from outside of legal to within a large firm?
Yes, I did. There was a lot of it. The legal community is very nice in that you do develop a community with other law firms, peer CIOs. I got to know quite quickly, which was different. It was refreshing and nice. Just a little odd in my prior background. It would be frowned upon, to say the least, to have a relationship with your peer at a competitor. That would be a negative, not a positive. Where it's the opposite in legal, which is quite nice. But from a legal process point of view, I think there were some differences. I think there's a lot of specialty companies, software companies, and other vendors that specialize in the legal vertical. And often then law firm technology teams really look into that smaller set of vendors, and there might be, the right solution, there might be the right partner in that space. However, there wasn't often a broader view at what's going on in technology and other verticals and other industries and people that might not specialize. So we still are partners with a lot of people that specialize in the legal industry for sure. However, we keep our eyes open if it makes sense to look outside of that. And I think people are crossing more industries now than they did previously when I first joined.
This is really relieving to hear that there is some collaboration with your colleagues across, because
Yeah.
everything we've heard, or I should say, everything I hear about law is about the silos in law. So that's actually really refreshing to hear that you have some interaction with your, technically with your competitors, and that it's fairly collaborative, I guess is the word I'm looking for.
Yeah, and that's if I can jump in again there,
Yeah.
Nick, it's extremely, even just, I like to use real life examples. Today, as an example, I had 2 meetings today with 10 to 20 other law firm CIOs.
Oh, wow.
That were very collaborative in nature. One of them, and they were both not, now I'm very close with the other people in my region, Philadelphia. However, both of these, calls just like this, video calls, were people from all over. There were people even outside of the U.S. There was a CIO from a London-based law firm. I think not many outside of the continental U.S., but maybe 15 other law firm CIOs from California to Chicago to Florida to New York and Philly. And that is different in the legal space, and but there is a lot of collaboration there and knowledge sharing there. And just a real life example, that was a call about what's going on with COVID and what people are struggling with, and what technologies and initiatives you're working on. And that was just a very open sharing of how people are using Zoom and Teams and different collaboration solutions, and how they're integrating better collaboration in their firms.
That's great to hear.
Yeah. Very good to hear. And Nicole, would this have been when you were practicing? Is this something you would have expected, that type of collaboration between firms?
I mean, definitely not. So I'm really happy to hear that at the upper levels that's happening or starting to happen. I think from my perspective, it felt very much like there was almost fear between law firms that if we have a secret sauce, we don't want the other firms to know, or if there's a tool that it makes us particularly competitive, we don't want to tell other firms about it lest we lose our competitive edge. So it's great to hear that that's not necessarily the case.
Yeah, I'm sure there are, Nicole, per your point, that's an excellent point. I'm sure there are, and I'm not sure I figured out where the line in the sand is, but there are definitely areas. The e-discovery team is part of my information services department, and their billable resources. That's for sure one thing that I've discovered over time, that people will not share utilization and profitability and realization rates, and that inherently sort of makes sense. So there are some things that people do keep as competitive advantages. However, there's the most of it, almost all the things we seem to want to collaborate about is open, and people will be open as more than I would expect to share how things are going, challenges and plans.
That's great. That's very, and I'm hoping that's just in part a sign of the times, right? We're all struggling a little bit here, so why don't we try to be helpful? But it does sound like you've had a little bit more of that open experience since you've come to law, so that's good to hear. When it comes to evaluate, do you have like a criteria, Michael, that you follow at all in evaluating new technologies for potential?
Perfect. I'm so curious to hear.
Yes, we have. So in my background in corporate America, and previously I'm a process-based person, and I have a little bit of Six Sigma background. So my prior company was a big lean Six Sigma shop. So I sort of take the best of all those worlds through in my career and try to bring like nuggets along that I think make sense to keep with me and to embed in my journey in the tech space. So short answer is yes, we do, I feel like it's normal blocking and tackling. However, some of these things weren't instilled when I got to Fox. So we will look at, normal business case. We always have more work and desires to do things than we want to. So it starts with a project governance model that kicks off at an annual IS strategy and planning meeting. And that includes firm leadership. Our managing partner there is our chief operating officer is there. We do a past, present, future. How did we do last year versus what we said we were going to do objectively and even subjectively. We do partner surveys and other things. And then that filters into what's happening in the tech space and what are our plans and why are they our plans. And then we ultimately end up with a list of things we'd like to do. that get prioritized in our governance model and put into our budget. And then when we get to the point where we're evaluating tech and we have an initiative we think is worth pursuing, we are a partner with Gartner and we leverage that relationship and we use them to help improve, I call it our time to knowledge or time to decision. So if we're looking at a data loss prevention solution, something we did a few years ago, we'll look to see who are the leading players in the industry. We'll look to see how they're a fit. So we'll look to see who's technology mature, who's stable, who's a good fit to our architecture. So we'll look at architecture fit, vendor fit, security fit. We'll look at, and Gartner might help speed up some of that knowledge. I'll call it speed the knowledge because they'll have a lot of material on those vendors already put together. And then ultimately we'll bake off 2 or 3 depending on the size of a decision and pilot those things. And we're not only piloting at the tech, we're also evaluating the relationship. Especially if we think it's a long-term partner, we really want to have a vendor or partner we deal with that we think will be a good someone to deal with, knowing that you'll go through good times and you're going to have challenges. And we want someone that we feel like will be a good partner when there are struggles to work those things out together.
Excellent. Nicole?
I mean, I have questions all through there. So help me understand in terms of when is a solution big enough that it would make its way sort of onto your desk? Are there smaller solutions that get through office or regionally, or how does that work generally?
Yeah, all good questions. You say good question, then it makes it sound like some questions aren't good. So I'll stop using that phrase. Good question. From a technology point of view, so we have a project governance model and a little bit of a workflow tool that helps with our controls to make sure the right thing's happening at the right time. So if it's a new vendor, if we're a new solution, they'll all go through me.
Okay.
We have a governance model and a spend limit, things over a certain threshold for other things. For renewals and stuff like that, actually, I think all really agreements at the end of the day will flow through me. New agreements, more so, I'll get involved with. I am a big fan of empowering my teams and direct reports, and I'm a huge believer in sort of scale and empowerment and accountability. I'm a big John Cotter fan on leading change. So I leverage all those things from my past experiences to help move as quick as possible. But back to your question, new tech I will be aware of. I'll be involved to help make sure we do the right things. And I'm not trying to micromanage at all. It's actually quite the opposite. I'm really trying to make sure we've done the right things to make the right decision. For bigger things, though, that we'll sign multi-year agreements, I do want to get involved and often meet some folks on the other side before we sign off, just to make sure that the relationship is something that I feel like is going to be a good one and we'll have a good partnership.
Sure. Okay. So that sounds like you're going to be fairly busy then, if you're involved across the road in terms of new technology. How then do you determine sort of who you mentioned? One of the things you mentioned that stuck out to me was a mature company, and as a startup, that's something that sort of piques my ears. What are some of the determinations that help you feel that the company is stable and credible? And let's say for something that's not going to be a security risk. Those are different questions when it involves client data. I understand that.
Yeah, well, that's a good question, Nicole. Actually, not everything would be a mature company evaluation. If we're trying a new technology, something that's in the emerging tech space, naturally we're not going to, that option wouldn't even exist. It wouldn't even make sense to us. If we're doing something like our email service or our infrastructure technologies and server technologies, naturally they've been around for a while, so we'd look at it differently. And we are looking at some new vendors right now as an example in the innovation space and the robotic process automation space. We've been, in that space for a while. That's a newer space. Of course, some of the bigger players will quickly try to get in there, either organically or inorganically. We might decide to go with a smaller, newer partner who is very passionate and has some, we think is a good alignment for us early on. So not always will we go with those big proven vendors. I just wanted to clarify that. Now, what was the other part of your question there, Nicole?
So I guess then how do technology companies software companies get noticed by you in terms of be vetted in the first place?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. That's a challenge. Actually, my peer CIOs at other law firms and myself, we actually chat about that with a decent frequency. I guess maybe two angles. One is, my email is public information, on our website. You
probably get a lot of cold emails, I imagine.
I might get 15 to 20 cold phone calls a day, and more than that in the email space. And I'm determined to be polite and from the time I take my first breath to my last. So if I answer the phone call, I'll be polite, but I also don't want to waste people's time. So if someone's pushing something on me that we already have or not looking for, I'll politely say that to them. And of course, sometimes people are pushy and won't want to get off the phone. And I've unfortunately been in the circumstance where I've tried to still be polite and they keep on pushing, and I say I need to get off the phone, and I have hung up on people. It doesn't happen very often, but sometimes people don't want to get off the phone, and no matter what I say, even if I say I'm going to hang up now, they keep on talking. Now that's an extreme example, but it is a challenge, and I'm not sure I have the world's best answer for you there, Nicole. I think some of it is honestly a little bit of luck. With they're calling at the right time and there's a need. We have developed a process though. If people email, we have a shared mailbox that I'll put it in, or other IS managers will put it in. And I honestly will tell people if a need comes up, we will go into that mailbox and do a search. I used DLP earlier. I'll say we're searching for a data loss prevention partner, or we're searching for an RPA solution. And so their time isn't wasted, and we might quickly come up with a list of people. And to give them credit, they're proactively trying to get in, and we should, at a minimum, start there. That's a repository to look at. So we will do that. And some of it's through relationships as well. That's back to sort of a little bit of luck, I call it, where we're looking for something or someone's coming in. I think just a week ago, someone reached out to me, and it was coincidentally something that we were talking about internally. And it just, again, I'll use that word luck. We'll look at it. Outside of all those things, I will look at Gartner's Magic Quadrant, as I mentioned earlier, if it's something that's been around for a while as a starting point, and or through all our networking and conference attending and ILTA and LegalTech and all these other kind of things. There's a lot of vendors you'll get to know and relationships. And then last but not least, for the long-winded answer, back to the collaboration legal space, other law firms will share successes with peer firms. And they'll say, hey, I've used this vendor, or I'll even email other law firm CIOs and say, we're looking at a new meeting room manager solution. Do you have anybody that you would highly recommend or recommend? And people will share with each other, people they're proud or would like to share on.
That's fantastic. I kind of had a little bit, it kind of hit me before Nicole's last question. When you're evaluating, and I'm not sure, you kind of asked it, I think, Nicole, but when you're evaluating a technology, do you evaluate for firm-wide deployment, or can it be, or is it practice-based? Is it the litigation group versus the probate group or your commercial transactions group? Are you evaluating a variety of those, or are you primarily looking at firm-wide deployment?
That's an excellent point. For me personally, I'm primarily on the enterprise side of things. I have a direct report who has a great long experience in legal and understanding the business of legal and the software side, and she's done an excellent job. So she's got a team of people in the software space, including buy and build developers, where we might build some in-house technology. And people that support packaged apps. Fox has 76 or more practice groups, so we're a very diverse law firm in terms of practices that we support, and we do have practice, specific software. So her and her team will evaluate those practice-specific IP software or family law software and other different practice groups, and they will. Now, my involvement there would be very small. I'd want to make sure that things are budgeted, and she's very good at it, so I don't need to get involved in that space much at all. We're just aligned from a strategy point of view. We do try to naturally consolidate if we have people in a different practice group that all want different software. Her and I will work together, and she'll bring me in if needed to try to say, okay, we don't need 3 pieces of software, that could be one. And we'll try to have those discussions, and I might need to escalate that. She's done an excellent job since I started. Just to give her, Kathy Scott is her name, to give her some kudos. When she started, we had 800 pieces of software. She started shortly after I started. I brought her in, and she helped. And we were half the size as we are now. We were 500 attorneys with 800 pieces of software. We're now over 1,000 attorneys, and we have closer to low 300s pieces of software. So
interesting.
She was helped
That's huge.
She was instrumental to really consolidate. Now everybody still has all the tools they need, but we don't have 4 things where we could have 1 or 2.
Yeah, eliminate those redundancies.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Go ahead, Nicole. I know I know there's something brewing.
So I have questions around how software gets evaluated when the evaluator is not the end user. So in situations where, of course, I'm going to use our company as an example because that's what my knowledge base. So litigators are our end user, and then often we're evaluated by knowledge resources or library staff, and it's always an interesting process for me because there feels like sometimes there's a misalignment there where I don't actually get the tool into the hands of the end user to be able to give feedback. And so curious there, I guess one, what would be a way to try to help deploy into where we could test with actual end users, or if that's something where it's a gatekeeper and you want to make sure that only the most vetted products get through. And it's a long-winded question, but
I think it's an excellent point. Actually, we've talked about that at Fox a lot. When I first started, one of the complaints, that's probably the right word, from partners in our firm was just that often the IS department will implement technology, but for attorneys with never having attorney input. So I chair our firm's technology committee for just that reason, Nicole. We implemented a policy, for lack of a better word, or it's probably a better word for it, but where we leverage, and before we roll out either major changes to software or select software, we will engage with the actual end users. And if that's the litigation department or a family law group, that we will have them at the table with us. Now we will try, they might come with an opinion right off the bat that will help put through the process. If they have a need without an opinion at all, we might help consolidate. We might take some burden off of them and come up with 2 or 3 we think are worthy, or the other non-vetting about them, things they would care about, and then we'll bring it to them to pilot. So we will, for new technology, for sure we'll pilot it, and for major upgrades, as where we can, as much as possible, we'll get it to some users. Our tech committee is actually sort of our target pilot group with a lot of technology. We gate almost all new tech through them, and they sit in my annual strategy planning meeting, so they know what we want to do and why and how we did last year, and then they're with us throughout the year with those things, and then they'll be a great asset for us when we roll out new tech. Then it's a different sales pitch or delivery. We can say, hey, Nicole helped test it. She's a lawyer in the firm, as you know, and we're not going to put too much weight on you to say, if you have any complaint, call Nicole. However, it's a different story rather than just me, sort of some IS guy, saying we think it's good.
So that's you kind of have some in-house advocates for a solution in that sense. And to kind of piggyback on what Nicole was asking, in the getting it to the end user. Now, so I've got, this is episode 95. We've got I think probably 92 or 93 where startups have talked about the difficulties in the long sales cycle. Yes. Well, in an enterprise that is understandable that it's going to be a longer sales cycle. Is that having to get some of that end user input and let them use it and get some traction with it to understand it? Is that part of why the sales cycle is longer for big law sales?
Sure. How long is the sales cycle at Fox in general?
Oh, good. Yeah.
They're good questions. Now, so if Fox is my only firm, I think our time from the time where we made a decision we're going to do an initiative to our time we've signed an agreement, that time at Fox is actually not that long. I'm not sure I have stats around it, However, from talking to peer CIOs at other law firms, a lot of it's how the firm is governed. So above me at our firm, there's not a lot, and this is a positive, not a lot of governance, and that person running our firm would agree with it. We're not a big committee-based firm. So as much as there's a technology committee, I chair the tech committee. I do not need their approval for spend.
And that is a difference.
That's a major difference. So I'm able to actually, when I joined the firm, a lot of people there thought, coming from a corporate structured model, I would be frustrated. They perceived that would be faster than at Fox. It's actually the opposite.
Really?
Like my old corporation was private equity owned and then went public, and it took forever to make a decision there. And at Fox, we're way more nimble and quick. So I don't think that's the same at all firms. Right. Depends on how decisions are made. So once we get, I more so, and the firm leadership likes this model, I more so inform our executive committee of our plans and keep them abreast of how we're doing versus get their approval. Now I have to load things into a budget, and I have to stick within my budget and have to do forecasts and all those kind of things. But I'm a big believer, what's a bad segue, of an open communication and dialogue. My budget's open. The guy running the firm can see it at any given time, real time, what our spend is and actuals, and even spend in flight where we've committed to a purchase order where we haven't yet gotten a check or a bill. So he has full visibility to that, and he has full visibility to that since I started 7-8 years ago. And we trend our cost per attorney and we normalize our cost over time and compare it as best we can to industry standards. So I think all of that openness helps in a trust relationship and helps us with future spend, and especially if they're part of the planning at the beginning of the year where we articulate our plans and the reasons behind it. Then we always get final approval at the time of signing an agreement, and that generally goes well. So yeah, our time is quite quick. We struggle though, Nick, to your question, sometimes with getting engagement. Sometimes the partners are, as much as they want something, they're too busy, and I understand it. And at times we'll allow it to move ahead with partial involvement with people. We try not to go down to zero involvement. We did have one project recently where everybody was too busy, and we deployed a major update to our time entry system, and people didn't like the changes from the vendor. But I'm a big believer of pain equals change. So I leveraged that event where the people were frustrated to say, okay, going forward, we're all commit. How do we do it? We need to get involved. Okay, well, I know it's a pain, but we need some involvement from attorneys because we're not attorneys, and we need your input. And so that bad event might turn into a good event long term.
Yeah, that is interesting. So it really is. So, and that's good insight that I haven't had as long as I've been doing this show, is that really the corporate governance or the governance structure of the firm can play a big role into how quickly something gets adopted. That is really insightful. We have a question from Sujesh, one of our visitors here tonight and a former guest. He said, and this is a good question, Sujesh, what type of issues are top of mind for you that you're evaluating right now for, has COVID changed priorities from a firm perspective, and what issues are you evaluating for tech solutions right now?
Yeah, excellent topic. So yes, that has changed. We were lucky enough, I would say, or maybe it was good planning. I like the word luck, that our move to home was rather painless. We were able to get everybody home, even non-laptop users. We had VPN clients in there and Wi-Fi enabled desktops. So we were able to quickly get our whole firm home and productive. However, for sure that's changed our priorities. I mentioned collaboration. We're looking at how do we improve collaboration. We have a lot of our workforce that wants to come back to the office, and we're looking to allow that to happen safely up to a volume of people. And then we have a bunch of other people that don't want to come back. So we're trying to make it as productive for them as possible at home. My call today with other law firm CIOs was just on this topic, actually. And I talked a lot with SafeArt's CIO, who I'm very friendly with out of Chicago, and we're all very similar in how we approach things. And we're looking at stipends. Do we offer a stipend to attorneys? Do we offer a stipend to staff so that they can build out a home office? We haven't done that yet. If anybody wanted anything, they had to either bring it or buy it on their own. However, if this is going to extend, we might have to rethink that model. And then collaboration, we're pushing hard. We're a big Cisco WebEx shop, and we use WebEx Teams. And so far, we haven't forced that on everybody. Some people didn't want yet another way to get bugged, but other people want to be able to bug them that way. So we're in the middle of those discussions on, do we force it on everybody and you have to monitor your phone and email and a chat room or not? We're looking to integrate that into our new business intake system, though. When new matters open, we'll automatically create a matter room and integrate that into our document management system.
Interesting.
So that we can, keep those electronic records as part of our official file, and that'll take us. That's a good example of something we didn't have on our roadmap at the start of the year, and we sorted our portfolio, and now that's one of our top initiatives of how do we get that embedded into our process and automated, and allow people to leverage that tech.
Yeah, that's interesting. Crazy how the priorities have changed
Exactly
since March 1st, just about.
Absolutely.
Yeah, go ahead, Nicole, if you have.
I was just going to say, and that made me think about, I wonder if you brought on any new software since COVID has hit, and if you have, how did sort of that procurement process change, or did it because you were able to collaborate remotely and so it didn't change?
Yeah, I'm not sure our procurement process changed. In new software, we did reopen. Fox has 27 offices. We reopened all the offices. Of course, to do that, we needed to develop, and I said on the committee, to develop the policies and procedures to open them safely.
Right.
So we did bring on some software, sort of. Not sort of. We did bring on software to help with a daily self-checker. So before if you're approved, you have to be scheduled and approved to come in. If you're scheduled and approved to come into an office, you have to fill out this survey at home before you leave. It gives you a red light, green light at the end. The office is notified if you got red or green, not the details of it, naturally from a HIPAA point of view, but they are notified, and you can't come into the office unless you got the green light. If you got the red light, our HR group might reach out to you and have a discussion to make sure for contact tracing. If you were in the office previously, so they're going to ask other questions to make sure that you were keeping everybody else safe. So we did have to change the priorities there to go after that. Naturally, we didn't anticipate that at the beginning of the year, and we did spend time evaluating. Now, back to innovation and new vendors, that's a new space, right? No one had. I couldn't go to Gartner and open up a Magic Quadrant and say who has contact tracing solutions. So that's a good example where through our network we looked and talked to vendors, and then back to evaluation. Maybe this is even an excellent point, Nicole, for your space. We had to then evaluate vendors who said we have something. We had literally a vendor who said they had something to Gartner, and we got on the phone with them, and they didn't have something yet. They were going to have something in a month or two. And it was a long time in the meeting before we figured out they didn't really have it yet. Now, they were going to have it eventually, but it wasn't there yet, because we asked, could we see it and pilot it? And they said, call us back in a month and we think we'll have something for you.
And what a change for our legal tech folks who are trying to sell to law firms, right? And we've got the time, but we're evaluating health tech at the moment.
There's some other priorities.
There's some priorities there. That is that's interesting to hear how that works. And Jacob asks in the chat, he says, can you speak to your vendor evaluation cycle timeline? Is it more likely that you buy or renew software based on a standard cycle or on the need identification date? That sounds like some jargon too, Jacob. It sounds like you've had some experience with the need identification date, which is terminology I'm not familiar with.
Yeah, so I'll answer something that, I'll answer what I think I heard there.
What you think you heard, okay.
Yeah. So I would say both. So we're right, I like real life examples. We're right in the middle of renewing our agreement with a managed print provider that we use. It's a decent spend. Now, it's a good example too of that's now different. No one's in the office as much as they were. Printing is different.
Yeah.
So we're trying to take advantage of this event to change people's behaviors and print less, not go paperless. I don't know if that's a realistic goal, but if we can we could be more productive and end up coincidentally with less paper. If you can mark up things on your laptop, which everybody's laptop is a touch screen, and we all have PDF technology and markup technology that you can do online with your mouse or your finger or a pointer. So we're trying to help people do things differently electronically. Anyway, we're renewing, that's too much of a segue, that agreement. And so that's a date-based, right? It's a 3-year agreement. It's up for renewal. We have a repository and a ServiceNow solution that we have all our agreements, and we know the renewal timing. So for sure, for renewal timing, we'll do that on that just-in-time, or as-needed basis. However, for the survey I mentioned earlier, that was out of the blue. We didn't know we had a need. So that was a need-based agreement. The firm had a need. We had a sense of urgency to get offices opened quickly, and we felt like we needed to have that software in place. Technically, I guess we could have done it via email or manually or some other way. But for 2,000, 2,100 people and 27 offices, the scale wasn't really going to be there for people doing that every day. So I felt like we needed to get that tech in place in an automated fashion,
Sure.
and we were able to do that.
That's fantastic.
Do you have a preference in terms of contract length? Let's say for a new vendor, would you prefer to dip your toe in first, or the longer contract is better because then you don't have to deal with renewal for a number of years and you lock in a better price?
Yeah, I would say it's situational. And again, I like real life examples. Just today with our director of security, we're looking at some new software in that space, a cloud access security broker, CASB. That space is consolidating rapidly. Him and I just had this exact conversation today about, do we want to do a 1 year or a 3 year agreement? I would say typically we're talking 1 or 3 on the majority of things. Sometimes we'll go a little longer than 3, not very often, but it'll be for all the reasons that you could expect. We decided, him and I today, just a few hours ago, to do a 1 year model based on, we feel like that space is evolving quickly. We feel like there's a lot of consolidation going on. And in a year from now, we think
could be different.
So if we think it's changing rapidly, in the security space for sure is one of those spaces, we'll have shorter agreements. If it's in the storage area network space, we might do 3 or 5 years if we think that makes more sense. So it's situational based on the maturity, based on what's happening in that space, and sometimes even based on the cost. We're renewing our e-discovery managed service provider agreement right now, and we've had some reservations with them. They had a little bit of an issue with public. I'm not going to say the vendor name, but they had a security breach. So we're only going to do a 1 year agreement. We think they've done the right things. However, their 3 year offering wasn't that much, wasn't very advantageous versus the 1 year. So if they're giving us a massive discount, we would consider it. But him and I talked today, as an attorney who works for me, and we agreed to do just a 1 year on that. Now, both of those things will take a little time to sign, but that's we have these strategy discussions on length of term, where it makes sense.
Yeah, that's an interesting, that at the enterprise level is one of those things, most of ours are on the vendor side. And so that's really interesting to hear. You are dealing with things that are public, and I don't expect you to name names. I don't, but most of us in this more of the startup space, in the smaller space, we're just trying to sell and get our product out there and get it in use and get adoption. But you have some public relations aspects that we don't always deal with on our side.
And I'm just on the startup space as we're talking, and back to this collaboration. I think the startup space is very interesting. Our firm, and named a chief innovation officer.
Nice.
I sit on our chief innovation committee that we meet monthly on. So, there's a lot of, if you use the word innovation, you might use new, might not always be new, but regardless, there'll probably be more new things there than other places. So we will look at those startups for sure in that space. And then back to collaboration, that's the one thing I like about legal, and maybe it's unique to me or Philly. We will share if we've come up with a new vendor and we get success. Actually, the CASB example is a good example. The vendor we're talking to knows when he gets a foot in the door in legal that the Philly community will share it, and he's offering us a very attractive financial offer. But he does have one string attached. His string attached is if it goes well, and he's saying if it goes well for us and we're happy, would we be willing to host in Philly the other law firms to do a success story? And he's only saying we wouldn't do that if we're unhappy with it. So he's got skin in the game there, but he's giving us a good deal, and he's probably not making money or breaking even. But
so he wants that testimonial.
He's banking on the testimonial and the growth inside of legal, because legal, does share with each other.
That's really great to hear, and I don't think that that's common to some other large firms. I can tell you that it's been interesting. What I mentioned when we first came in about some firms wanting to keep their secret weapon. I have firms that are extremely excited about our technology, but that we sign an NDA with, and we don't speak of them, and it's hard because sometimes when we have some of our largest clients and then we can't even talk about them.
Yeah, that is hard.
So it's really nice to hear that, you know, depending on the firm that you're working with, it could be something where you build it into the relationship to say, look, we can make more attractive terms to the extent that you might be willing to help, you know,
be our word of mouth. Yeah,
exactly.
Be our word of mouth.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really interesting. In kind of a follow-up on that is you talked about your chief innovation officer and looking at the startup space. Are you reluctant to work with the more early stage companies, or will you take a look at them if they have a really impressive offering that maybe another vendor does not?
Yeah, short answer is it's no. I'd say we're not reluctant to look at those startups. I think the broader, I don't know if we've really tested that feeling though. We've had that discussion when we formed this innovation, added a title to someone's role, and we formed a committee, and we got some key partners in the firm that are passionate about it, engaged. However, and we spent time thinking about, this isn't exactly what you asked, Nick, but we spent time saying, are we okay to fail? Meaning, are we okay to try some things? And if they don't work out, well, we won't necessarily throw the kitchen sink at it financially. So let's be smart about how we try things. But if we can pilot things and, if 1 out of 3 works or 1 out of 4 works, that's probably a good batting average. So we've said those things in meetings and we've all agreed to that. I don't know if that's happened yet. So I think the proof will be in the pudding. If we try a couple things and they don't work, we might have to remind firm leadership that that's okay and that's a good thing. We just have to be smart about how much we invest in it before we come to that knowledge and come to that decision. So I think as long as we do it the right way and we do it in small chunks and kick the tires properly, we'll be fine. And then of course when we do hit those, get on base, my John Cotter example earlier, we should celebrate that and grow it and try to get more value out of it and build more value out of that over time.
And I guess just a quick follow-up to that, and Nicole, you may have one as well, but is there a sweetener for a startup to offer that to you? Is sometimes a 14-day or 1 week or 14 days is enough, but if they offered a 30 or 60-day window for you guys to actually really try something out, do you find that beneficial for really onboarding people or not?
Excellent. Yeah. Yes, definitely. We find that beneficial. We, I'll use the word pilot. We would like to, all new tech, especially something brand new, we will pilot it. Some vendors are shorter with that window and more reluctant. There was a vendor recently who didn't want to, actually in the COVID survey, they had a solution, but they weren't willing to allow us to pilot even one license internally for 1 day. There was zero willingness. We had to trust that it would work and buy the license and no pilot. So we, that's a real life example where we walked away then from that vendor. We weren't comfortable doing that. And I was just sort of against the concept sort of baffled me why they weren't willing to do anything, and it made me fearful. So short answer is yes, that's awesome if they're willing to. Now it doesn't need to be unreasonable what that time period is. Maybe it's 2 weeks, maybe situationally could be a little longer. But if people focus, you should be able to evaluate it relatively quickly, and then the risk on the vendor should be small. And then as long as the solution works, the value should be large.
Excellent. Go ahead, Nicole.
What are some of the pitfalls that you see when legal tech companies are trying to sell in? Is it not giving a free trial? Is it imperfect pricing? What are some of the things that hold you back?
Yeah, such good questions. The pricing's a big part. We're rolling out a new accounting system, and we went and shopped. We were on a system that was going to be end of life, and we needed to shop around, and we shopped around all the players there, and that was a bigger deal for us financially. Just leaping off your financial question, one of the vendors was putting up a number that we thought was way out of the ballpark, and we said we didn't want to play this back and forth game, so we said, could you give us your best and final? And everybody knew who else was, at the table, and they gave us a number that we thought was not even close, and then we politely told them we're going to walk away, and then a day later they came back with 40% off of that number.
Yeah.
And so for us, between myself and our COO, our minds, they sort of lost credibility. Then we have no idea what a good number is at this point.
Right.
And we were trying to be honest and upfront with them. And I understand, and we do want, and I'm a big believer, it needs to be a partnership and a win-win. We don't want people to lose money. They need to be successful for us to be successful. And I truly believe that. There's, but I'm not looking for people to retire off of their signature with us, right? So you don't need to make the boat and the fancy car off of just the one deal.
But that is how desperate are you for our business that you take a 40% discount after you gave us our best and final? Like if they had come,
interesting.
That was a rough move. Like I feel like if somebody came back with okay, we can go 10% lower, that seems reasonable, right? But yeah, that's difficult to decide. Now, what is the real number? I don't even know what the value of this service is.
Exactly.
Yeah. Michael, I don't want to keep you all night. It's been 45 minutes. I have a dozen other questions for you. Nicole probably does too. Can we keep you for 5 and get
Absolutely.
one? Okay.
Yeah, sure. I'm good. Thank you.
All right. Nicole, do you have a follow-up?
So that's actually, you made me think about it in pricing discussions. Is there an expectation at the CIO level that you are negotiating the contract, that there will be a price given, but then you will come back and there will be a process of negotiating that takes place that will become a lower price at the end? I always wonder that because I've had situations where I sort of expect negotiation, but what I get is, well, that was, maybe just nothing in response, where maybe they thought the price was too high, or maybe they didn't, and I don't know what happened, but I expected a negotiation. So curious from your perspective what that looks like.
Yeah, that's more of an art maybe than a science for us. If my team's evaluating or negotiating an agreement and they come back with, I have a director of enterprise architecture in our shared services team, and he's also got a lot of great experience, and he's a very good vendor manager. So he'll come to me with things where he's already done the evaluation. He's already come up with some logic behind it. And he'll come to me with, we evaluated these 3 vendors. We piloted the top 2. We like this vendor for this reason. And it's very short and to the point. And,
nice.
And here's the financials. Here's what we budgeted. Here's the financials. And I think it's a fair price for these reasons. And I have an engineering background. I'm a logic-driven person, and that speaks well to me. And in that case, I'll just, I might have a question or two, or I might just say, that sounds great, Kevin, go ahead and proceed. And he'll go ahead and take it from there and keep on going. So we don't, if it's a fair agreement and I feel like we've done the right due diligence and homework, we'll do that. The managed print, I like real examples agreement. We're right in the very end of that. That's, I think, up for renewal tomorrow, real life example. It's a 3-year renewal. We did shop it around, and they came in 25% higher on one side and 30% higher on another. But you needed to really drill down. It's a quite complicated agreement, as much as it sounds simple. So the team leading that came to me with something they weren't quite sure with it, and I spent time drilling into the numbers and comparing it to the other vendor and to the prior agreement. And then I went back to the vice president, to the firm directly, and said, hey, listen, here's where I see it. I think we're way off. And here's my logic. And, I try to give him a real honest story, but a story where he can understand my perspective and why I'm not comfortable with it, with some background. And he emailed me right back, and we have a meeting tomorrow. And he said, I get it. I see your point of view. We need to take a sharper look at this, and we'll come back with something better tomorrow. So I expect him to move a lot. That gets quite complicated, though, by the way, because it's COVID basis. We're trying to forecast our future prints, and
I hear you.
We have no idea what that'll be. And I can empathize with him. He's trying to forecast, and are the last 3 or 4 months a good indicator for the next 3 years? No, hopefully not.
Hopefully not,
But we're trying to put together an agreement that makes sense, that we can fluctuate. So
sure. Interesting.
some of that is just the unpredictable nature of it. But
are there situations, sorry, I'm going to jump in really
Sure.
quick with this one, which is where too low a price can actually sort of concern you, or make you feel like it's too good to be true or something like that?
Absolutely. That will happen if we're getting 3 quotes on something and 2 are similar and 1 is abnormally low. That will for sure make us, think about it, and we'll have that discussion, and we'll probably engage with that vendor. We would engage with that vendor and even just make sure. We might not say those words right off the bat
Sure.
on the call. We might start with, did we communicate the right thing? And this happened in a storage area network agreement years ago, and we thought, did we do something wrong? Did we not give you the proper scope, the proper sizing? And we evaluated all those things just to figure out where the miss was. And then through those discussions, though, if that vendor is trying to get their foot in the door for some reason and offer something really low, we'll try to make sure we're really on the same page first, and then hopefully they'll let us know, that's what they're doing. And then even in that case, we might still have a little want to really make sure that makes sense and to make sure we're not missing something. And that's where Gartner or my legal network or other things will kick in those other relationships just to validate that we're not making some kind of mistake. But if we feel good about all that and they're just giving a real good honest price, once we've dotted our I's and crossed our T's, we might move ahead with it, but it will raise our eyebrows, that's for sure.
And that is actually, it's a good question you had, Nicole, because I have one similar on pricing strategy, and it looks like Alan has one as well. But on pricing strategy, when somebody is pitching you, now I know that a lot of folks look at the big law as the enterprise level of law, and so they want to do the enterprise style contract. Do you prefer the enterprise contract, or if it's just gonna be for this small section or this, this just group is gonna be the ones that benefit? Do you prefer the per user kind of licensing? Is there?
Yeah. It's situational again there, Nick. We at times we'll start on the practice specific software. We'll naturally we'll do named user license model or some other model which makes sense. As that bubbles up, that's a good example where sometimes those software solutions bubble up, either the practice or that becomes cross practice, and eventually we'll cross over and we'll have those discussions to say, now does it make sense to be an enterprise agreement? Sometimes we'll raise that topic ourselves. Sometimes the vendor might offer that up themselves, like an electronic signing vendor we were working with. That's a good real life example. We started with piloting it years ago, and we were allowing it to grow on its own, and then adoption became greater and greater, and we kept on adding licenses, and eventually we said, hey, this makes sense, and we think there's enough momentum here that we want to offer it out to everybody, and it's starting to make financial sense. So those two things crossed over, and we raised that discussion with the vendor. They agreed it makes sense, and we were able to come to an agreement, and we switched it over, and we did switch over to the enterprise license model.
Excellent. It's interesting that you guys will occasionally raise that as well. But again, what makes sense. And Alan's a friend of the show. He says, when it comes to pricing, do you have advice when dealing with partners who don't have an engineering background? And he couples this with a compliment. You clearly seem to get it, but I would say you're kind of a unicorn in that sense. So do you have advice for those when dealing with partners? Now, you have a different governance structure at Fox, which you've indicated is really helpful in making those decisions. But do you have any advice for those dealing with partners who don't have the engineering background?
Yeah. Yes, I would. I would say that the open, don't take anything personally. Don't take it defensively. If a partner's challenging you, which of course happens, where I am as well, I try to be short and to the point and share my thinking back with them. Sometimes that works. Actually, most often we end up then coming to getting on the same page. Sometimes we won't. I have a couple right now where some people are disagreeing. They want to do things in a way that we don't think makes sense, and I'll continue that dialogue. But I think being open and honest and short and to the point to me has been helpful. I do have a partner in the firm who reviews our budget annually. I develop the budget. goes through him. I don't know if he really has the power to say no to things, but when he first got this role, he wanted to naturally add value, and he felt like there was probably a lot of waste there that he could get after.
Sure.
And he was all excited. He told the COO, "I'm confident there's more software than we need. I'm confident we're not evaluating licenses properly and negotiating properly." And I wasn't offended. If
Sure.
he came in and found something, that would be great. That's good for all of us.
Totally.
So, we came into a meeting, it was first him and I, and we went through something in detail. He wanted to get more detail. I brought some more people in the room with us for a further meeting. We scheduled 4 hours to deep dive 320 software license line items in our budget. And he started drilling down on his questions. By the time we got to line 4 or 5, and we have a software license compliant officer who gets certified as part of our team. And we went through how we electronically count all the licenses for every year, and we validate the numbers, and how he pushes back on people. We look at usage statistics and push back. And we went through our process with him very openly, and he didn't know we did those things, which is fine. He never asked. I never felt the need to share. This was the right time to do it. Mm-hmm. Once he got to line item 5 or 6, true story, he realized there wasn't a lot of low-hanging fruit, and he felt like now we had the right process and controls in place. And he ended the meeting. He gave us 3.5 hours back, and
funny.
And that was 2-3 years ago. And every year since, our budget review process is now 15 minutes, and we go through some stuff, and not that short, but now it's more focused on the good stuff. What's our strategic direction? Where are we going to focus? Does this make sense? What's our spend look like over time? And are we going to ask for the right amount of money outside of the portfolio? So that has helped a lot. So I would say just be open, be willing to take some hits, and sometimes those hits are hard. Sometimes people come across emotional and angry and aggressive, maybe is the right thing. But if you can have a good approach and not take it personally, and just listen and try to figure out how we're going to move together, I think it tends to work out.
That's great. Michael, I want to thank you and Nicole for being here. We've
Absolutely.
kept you 10 minutes longer than I expected. I'd extend this offer to please come back to us sometime in the future and share some more, because the questions were fantastic. The answers were fantastic. And this is helpful to all those in the startup space and audience members. So I thank you for that. Can you tell people where to find you online if they're interested in talking to you? Not that you need a lot more emails.
Oh, sure.
Emails coming your way.
I am online. Thank you, Nick. And I would be happy to come back. And I'm Rinehart, RINEHART @foxrothschild.com. If you go to my firm's website, you will find me there, and send me an email. I will look at those emails. They do come in. And if you have follow-up questions, I'd be happy to. And I'm a big networking person, so I'm happy to get to know people here, and
That's awesome.
and to see if there's a mutual fit down the road where we can benefit each other. So that'd be fine.
Fantastic.
Perfect.
And Nicole, where do folks get in touch with you?
You can find out more about Trellis at trellis.law, and you can find me on Twitter at Nicole_A_Clark, and also on LinkedIn as well.
Excellent. So thank you, everybody. Don't disappear when we stop recording. I'll give you the follow-up there, Michael, as to when this all lands on the internet.
Perfect.
Thank you for all your questions, folks. Thanks for being here live. And we won't see you next week. I'm taking a few days off. So we'll see you the following week.
Bye, guys.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye.